Hello, amazing. I'm live, I think. Hi. How is everyone doing? I hope you're well. Welcome to another Thursday session. I was just on live before, so sorry anyone that was on that call. But yeah, today I'm going to be speaking to Dr. Bekah Shallcross, really thinking about your needs and how to prioritize them, and why us as women are kind of susceptible to deprioritizing our own needs, and where it comes from, whether it's helpful, how we unlearn these things. Like, there's lots and lots to go into, but I feel like this whole area of conversation around needs and how to claim them, and why we don't claim them, I think it's really powerful, and I'm really excited to speak to Dr. Bekah Shallcross about it, because she's a feminist therapist. So her whole practice is around, deconstructing the patriarchy that is within our bones, and a lot of that is why we end up not prioritizing our own needs, because we think that makes us a good person. Okay, there is Bekah. Okay, let's get started. Hey, Keish. Hi, guys. Amazing to see you.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. We got there.
Yeah, we did. Yes. Sorry to anyone that was on the call before, but hello.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah. No, I don't know what happened there, but how are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. I'm
Good.
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 How yeah, I'm really excited to speak to you about today, because I feel like our practices are really different. Obviously, you're a doctor, you're a therapist, and my practice is very much it's practical, it's facilitated sessions. I'm a coach, so two very different disciplines, but I feel like there's an intersection where a lot of what we discuss kind of meets.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think we both have a focus on working with women, right? And that's probably the main thing that means that some of the stuff that we're talking about, it is overlapping with our clients.
Yeah, definitely a lot of burnt out and want to be altruistic women.
Yeah.
What's the trap they're getting caught up in?
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting. I was just reading a paper before about how in teenage years, girls often lose confidence in the strengths and abilities that they have, because of this idea that they should be adhering to feminine narratives, so being altruistic, as you just said, prioritizing the needs of others to the detriment of their own, and not aligning themselves with kind of like traditionally masculine traits, such as being competitive, right? So we're actually we're like, those narratives are being ingrained from us from a very young age, and what that means is that we sort of even start to lose touch with what our strengths are, what our abilities are, what our needs are, and that comes from society, but it might also come from our family systems. It might also be the narratives that we've internalized ourselves as well. So lots of different messages, I think, that we receive that all kind of saying the same thing, and that's why it's really hard to even notice this stuff creeping in, right? It's That's part of the battle, I think. I don't know if you find that with clients as well, that it's just so out of our conscious awareness, we're not even aware that it's happening.
Absolutely. And even on a personal level, I kind of remembering in school when I was playing football with other girls, I'd be running really fast and like going for it. As soon as I knew people were around, I literally remember me suddenly becoming girly,
Yeah.
Because, so it must have been, no one has directly said anything to me, but I knew that I needed to be, I don't know, it sounds really bad, but I wasn't scoring goals if there were too many people watching. So I was deliberately softening myself and making myself lesser. So and in terms of how it shows up with clients, everyone is different, right? But just this eternal giving of self, which ultimately leads to this kind of sense of loss, or sense, this bereft kind of resentment. And that's what I come across against. And sometimes the awareness of that resentment isn't actually there, but it stems from everyone being super important and you kind of getting pushed down the priority list quite significantly.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there. And I wonder, when you say like when there's people watching, I think a really big factor can be, you know, that sort of male gaze, right? So that women are taught, or girls are taught, to always hold in mind really that male gaze. So that there's like a phrase, I can't remember who it's from or where it's from, but it's something like, you know, men kind of look at themselves and women look at themselves as if a man is looking at them. And you know, just that kind of constant feeling under scrutiny, feeling watched, feeling having to perform femininity, as opposed to scoring the goal, right? Because we can. It's really powerful.
Yeah, it's quite an admission that I hadn't actually considered it. But yeah, the male gaze, we're kind of socialized to almost have the male gaze, to be conscious of the male gaze ourselves. So I'm really enjoying at the moment, the fashion is like really baggy clothes, like massive oversized. So I'm like, I really feel like it's a middle finger to the male gaze. It's like, no, fuck off. Like, I just had that thought today. I was like, that's really what's in fashion at the moment, because I feel like for so long it was just anything that showed, you know, waist, bum, and that was what we wanted, because we want that we're catering to the male gaze. Whereas now I think there's definitely more consciousness of it, and I'm here for it.
And I think it's really important to say that it's really great to challenge this where you can, where you notice that resentment coming up, but there is also, you know, there are also consequences, right, to challenging these narratives. And I think that that's what we also need to kind of acknowledge, really, because it is hard. And for some people, it's not just hard, it's very stigmatizing or very shaming or even very dangerous, right? So it's a really it's important that we kind of acknowledge that kind of like, we do want to challenge it, and maybe we do want to step outside of some of these narratives that are handed to us. But if we find that difficult or that feels really hard, there's reasons why, right? It's been set up that way so that we don't. So we do feel shame. So we do feel stigma if we're standing outside of those narratives. So it's all right. It's also okay to not be constantly challenging this stuff, because that's a really hard thing to do as well. So it's about, I think, firstly doing it in a way that you are safe, and then kind of thinking about small steps that feel manageable, doable, and that you doesn't have to be like, I never wear makeup again, or I never wear revealing clothes, or, you know, whatever some of those narratives might be. You know, it is very much about bringing into consciousness and then making conscious choices with your capacity in mind, sort of thing.
I think hearing what you're saying, I'm trying to apply it to just ground it in my experience, without wanting to make this whole interview about me, but just to ground. I feel like it's really helpful to kind of bring it into a really practical everyday reality. And I feel like I come across a kind of standardized, like, it just in the home, the male female roles, and I'm in my home, I definitely am like, okay, I'm going to set it up so it's 70-30, because I know that you're not even going to be able to. And I don't know if that's me like not doing a disservice to the cause. But it's like, but that's definitely, you know, because I have needs. I want to work. I love my work. I really enjoy what I do, but it takes a lot of work, you know. It takes effort to like speak to people and get yourself out there. But I will definitely work less because the majority of the house responsibilities are on my shoulders, as much as I'm you know, fighting against it. And I think that what I advise my clients is to communicate their needs and make sure that their needs are met. I'm doing this because actually I can't be bothered to sit and wait for someone to do something that I can do in 30 minutes. And this is really bad. I mean, there's a limit. Yeah, there's definitely a limit, but I'm communicating it's within my area of comfortability, but it is still 70-30.
Yeah. And this is it, right? Like, it's not there is no perfect way to do it. And, you know, if you've been doing like 100% of the stuff and then it moves to 70-30, then that's progress, right? I guess it's always holding in mind, like, how do I feel about this? There's nothing, you know, there's nothing, if you enjoy doing 100% of it, that's fine, right? It's all about your own choice and what works for you as, you know, a family unit. I guess that kind of idea about it's easier for me to do it, or I do it, I like it done my way, right, is another one that women struggle with. There's almost like that we can, particularly, so if we're in a heterosexual man-woman relationship where we've both been, you know, where the man has been socialized as a man and a woman has been socialized as a woman, that's when these kind of gender narratives can kind of come into play. I suppose most heavily, if you like. So when that kind of happens, we might find that again, we're not even conscious of the expectations on us as a woman. We've just internalized that, you know, perhaps that's what we've seen modeled. It's totally what we see in the media, right? Like you turn on a sitcom from the 90s, noughties, and it's like that's what you kind of see, and it's almost like made a joke of as well. So I think it's but this narrative that we can do it better, or it's easier if I just do it, it's something to just be wary of, or to be aware of, because that, you know, that kind of can mean that we just continue to take on that role. And of course, I often see this like in new parents, where almost like mums are allowed to kind of try it out, and maybe they have more experience with babies, but they sort of do it, and it's like, no, I'll do it, and then the baby starts to prefer them, and dad doesn't build confidence with it. So you know, there's also kind of letting go of our, you know, good enough. If it's done good enough and you agree that as a couple, what's good enough, it doesn't have to be done perfectly, and it doesn't have to be done your way, but as long as it gets done. But that's hard to let go of. Right, so I think there isn't like, if you don't do it 50-50, then you're, you know, not standing up for the cause or whatever. It's really about conscious choice and working towards what the goal is as well. Like, it doesn't have to happen right now, whatever your end goal looks like for you guys, right? But it's so common, really, really common to have that split. And again, so unconsciously, women are often like, how did this even happen? I don't, you know, how did we get here? So really common experience.
I mean, it's the emotional, I'm calling the emotional labor, like the nursery calls you, the doctor calls you, you know, all of these kinds of things. But to bring the conversation back to the needs, where do you think our belief around what we
She really wants to get in touch
yeah.
with you.
That is classic. My mom,
Yeah.
like, boundaries. No.
Boundaries in action here.
Literally. So can I ask you a personal question, Bekah? I know this is not what you're used to as a therapist, but
Yeah.
I that's what I'm really interested in, you know. Yeah, did you always have good boundaries? When did you have you always prioritized your own needs?
No. I think it's a really interesting thing about people who go into this work, right? Whether that's being a therapist or being a coach, there's often a reason that you're pulled towards it. And I think that's, you know, often your own personal experiences of, boundaries, or, you know, difficulties with emotions, or whatever it is that you're kind of like, your area of work is, you know, there's often a reason that you're kind of pulled in towards that healing role. You know, if we think about a healing role in a broader sense, so what we're both doing, and I think, I mean, even the concept of boundaries, you know, it's a relatively new concept to me, but a radical one that's, you know, that I've found really helpful. And so no, definitely not. It's not something, boundaries were just not something that I was brought up with in certain aspects. I think that's the thing, right? So boundaries apply to lots of different aspects of our life, but I think if I think about the narratives of womanhood, and particularly the narratives of motherhood and daughterhood as well, that was very much about caring for the needs of other family members, right, and prioritizing the needs of other family members to the detriment of your own needs and well-being, right? So it's not that we never think about other people's needs, but it's about having that we don't do that to the detriment of our own. So almost by having boundaries, we allow ourselves to meet our needs, and then we have more space to think about, do I have capacity to meet that person's needs? And do I want to? Right? Like, you're allowed to just not want to. But so I think people think that it's about never thinking about anyone else, but it's really about, you know, meeting your own needs, so that if someone does need something from you, you can think about, do I have capacity for that or not? So yeah, definitely something that I still very much work on. You know, I think again that we have this idea that that we become this healed person at some point, and I think people often come into therapy with that idea that, you know, what I want to do is no longer feel anxious, never feel depressed, and those emotions are part of life. So there's also this idea that these things are lifelong. It's just lifelong learning about understanding yourself in relation to other people. So I feel like that will be something that is, you know, for me and most people, an ongoing experience, really.
Definitely. So at what point do you think you started to prioritize your needs and come into this awareness of boundaries? Because I really love what you said about it not being a selfish act, because by having them, you enable yourself to show up more fully when you do choose to show up, as opposed to getting all your energy sort of dissipated in lots of different directions. So when was the turning point? Did it come through your studies? Did it come through, was there a certain point?
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit about this, and I think for me, motherhood really has been such a facilitator. Yeah. Have you found that?
Massively. On the slightly cynical side is you've got a ready-made excuse, ultimate, like there it is, like baby. It's no one can argue with that. But then I wanted to take it a step further, and this is what I do in my practice with women, just leading with my truth and learning to build that relationship with truth and relating from that space. So I always think that you don't want to dishonor yourself, by telling lies or using your baby as an excuse. It's a great one, but it's not the most honourable way to interact. But yeah, motherhood absolutely introduced me to more of myself and helped me with my boundaries. How was it for you?
Yeah, well, you know, I think so, kind of, I suppose within a therapy setting, we would think about when we become parents, it can bring up a lot of things, even if it's not conscious, you know, about how we were parented as well. So that's what I think can really, for lots of you know, new parents, be a real catalyst for suddenly kind of stuff coming up and what's that about, and wanting to kind of understand ourselves a little bit more, because suddenly what we're experiencing doesn't necessarily make sense, because we are, you know, reacting to our children, excuse me, from a place perhaps of how we were reacted to as children, right?
Scary when that happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
My mum just jumped out my mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, exactly. That's exactly it. And noticing those things. And, you know, for some people that that can be something that they want to think about and perhaps change. And for other people, it might be something they want to emulate, or, you know, there can be bits of both of those things within there. So, but it's definitely, I think it's a point, isn't it? That, I mean, it's, yeah, that can just really facilitate that thinking about self more, and what kind of parent do we actually want to be, you know, really requiring us to reflect on that and think about that, and maybe make changes to how we manage our own stuff so that we can parent in a way that we want to parent. So I'd say that was probably the catalyst for me in thinking about boundaries. And and what I always try and work out as well is, like, it's interesting, isn't it, because boundaries are quite popular at the moment and quite talked about, and it's always hard for me to know, almost like, has that coincided with me wanting to perhaps think about my parenting and think about my boundaries, or does me wanting to do that mean that I'm seeking that out more? And I don't, you know, I'll probably never know the answer to that, and it might be a bit of both. But
I definitely think it's in the ether. It's in the zeitgeist at the moment.
Yeah. So that's a happy coincidence as well, that you know, as I become a parent, these sorts of conversations are happening more and more, and yeah, and feel really, I think generally feel really helpful for people. I think there's quite a lot of conversations going on about, you know, different cultures and how they apply to different cultures, you know, because they can feel very, you know, like, from an individualistic culture, maybe they feel really helpful, but in collectivist cultures, maybe not so much. And that's an interesting thing to think about as well, I think.
Yeah, so true. Even my partner's not from here, so we have very different upbringings. And yeah, just seeing how that plays out into some of it's really helpful, but yeah, seeing how we interpret boundaries is really interesting. Luckily, we're both introverted, so that's helpful.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is making me think about the other side of the pendulum, where motherhood gives you a sense of self, and gives you a sense of authority, and I'm somebody's mother, like like I've got something really important to do. It's a whole human being, like, and suddenly you're like, I am somebody, even you were somebody before, but it gives you this, like, I've got to, like, really go for it. But then the other side of that is the pendulum swing goes, that's all I am. I'm just mum. So that whole deprioritizing your needs comes, I don't know if it's nature or nurture, but you literally have to keep this child alive. That child has needs, and your needs must be secondary. Your needs for sleep, your need for food. I don't know how many mums have had fish fingers for dinner, leftover fish finger, or, you know, kids cereal, or, like, your needs just aren't the priority. And part of that is No, nature. But then at what point do you? And I think that's where mums get a bit lost. At what point do you switch back and become you again? Does it work like that? Is it more fluid?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think that there's a couple of things going on, isn't there? That I think, firstly, we don't really, as a society, we have this weird thing where we really want women to want to have children and to have children, right? Like it's just this thing that's expected of you. So if you don't want to have kids, like, that's, society thinks that's a really weird thing. So so in a way, you're sort of celebrated when you are pregnant, but then the actual role of mothering is really devalued, I mean, in our society. So it's not something that people think, what a valuable thing to do to raise the next generation, right? Like, people think like, maternity leave's a holiday. You know, you shouldn't be able to work flexibly. Like, you see all of these negative kind of comments. There was a woman that won her case because her boss wouldn't let her leave early from work to go and collect her daughter from nursery because she had to. It wasn't early, it was like 5 o'clock, and she sued them and won. And you see the comments underneath that article, and it just tells you, like, actually, as a society, we really don't value the role of bringing up the future generation, right? So we have that.
What were the comments? Sorry, just so people can get an idea.
Oh, so the comments are things like, if you can't kind of look after your kids, then you shouldn't have kids, or this is why we don't employ women of childbearing age, those sorts of comments of,
oh wow,
yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the Daily Mail comments, so, but it gives you a sense of actually how some people do think about this stuff, which is, in my bubble, my little social bubble, wouldn't be coming up against those sort of narratives very often, but that is still out there. So we sort of devalue the role of mother. So when it then comes to stepping into that role, I think that's why we can feel really like lost, and like we don't have any value in that role, right? So we're not being paid for it. It's work that you do that you're not paid for. No one says thank you. No one celebrates that kind of role very often. So we kind of have that. And then when it comes to thinking about prioritizing ourselves in that relationship, again, the narratives that we generally hear or sort of believe, if you think about what you believe, they will be around, I must prioritize my child at all times, right? And or the needs of people around me, and I come last. So,
and that is good, and that's that's applauded. You actually do get some sort of societal or social kickback from that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's seen as a good, being a good mother, which is like an extension of the kind of good girl narrative, right, that we're brought up with, that we talked about right at the beginning of starting to move into altruism, not being competitive, not prioritizing other people's comfort over our own in adolescence. So I think it's really important that ultimately, when we're thinking about priorities, it's going to change through the lifespan of your child. When you first have your child and they're a baby and they need you 24/7 pretty much, right? Then it's going to be really hard to find space for you. But it's still really important that we do think about, what do we need, even if it's just the moments of what we need. thinking about boundaries around that space, thinking about who can help care for us. I think shifting towards caring for new mothers or birthing parents rather than visiting the child, right, holding the baby, being excited to see the baby, we should be going and visiting new parents and being excited to support them and bringing them food and, you know, that sort of thing.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and we've really moved, and that's what it would have been like, right? But we really moved away from that to like the baby being the center. And we need to, I can't help but feel if we actually move mum to the center, all baby needs, right, is for mum or birthing parent to be okay. That's what their needs are, is for their parent to be able to be okay, to then meet their needs. So it's, yeah, so it's, but it's obviously that's really difficult in the first days, but thinking about who you do want support from and who you don't, those are two really important things. And then that's going to change, and allowing a bit of yourself to be lost in that moment, I think, is okay. And then, you know, later down the line, a year, 2 years down the line, maybe earlier, maybe later, finding yourself again. And again, doing things that feel good for you, not having, there's no perfect way to do it. It's all about what feels good for you, doing it in small steps, but being conscious about what I need, right? That's what we often don't even know. So even thinking about what do I need is
because we've suppressed it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's a really strong muscle to be like, oh, I have a need, but it will either I've had a bad experience getting it met, or it doesn't get met, so a coping strategy is just to not have the need. I'm nicer when I don't have needs. People keep me around when I don't need anything.
Yeah.
So it's just a strong muscle to kind of weaken. So yes. I suppose one question is, how do you tune into your needs?
Yeah. Well, so an exercise that I quite like to use is it's like called like the magic wand exercise. It's basically writing down, I think, so there's I would say there's our needs, there's our wants, and there's our desires as well, right? So our needs are like the basic stuff. That's the basic stuff. We're also allowed to just want things because we want them, and we're allowed to desire things because we desire them. So I think it's about thinking about what often happens is people put limitations on their wants and desires, and that can stop you from identifying them. What do you need in order to meet those things? So an exercise about without any limitations. So if you didn't have, you know, financial limitations, if you didn't have family commitment limitations, what would you want your life to be like? And it's really, people find this really difficult, right, to even allow themselves, because this isn't necessarily like what you then go and do. It's just an exercise in getting in touch with and starting to allow those things to kind of come to the surface. So that doesn't mean, you know, if we write down I want to win an Oscar, that doesn't mean that that's then our goal. It might be, but it doesn't have to be, because the exercise is just in about letting out, bringing to the surface those needs, those desires, those wants. So that can be a really good starting place, particularly if you don't really let yourself consider what your needs are, what your wants are, what your desires are, as just the starting point. And from there, you know, there might be some that you think, yeah, like maybe an Oscar isn't going to be the one, but maybe starting my own business is, you know, and then you can, once you know that, once you're getting in touch with those things, then it's helpful to know that, so that you can think about what needs do I have around that, and how do I make those small but still challenging steps towards that, right?
Yeah, that's really nice. I love the blue sky thinking and being aware of those limitations. I have a similar exercise called I would love it if, or wouldn't it be, I would absolutely love it if, and that just, how do you finish that sentence? And that just kind of lets you, you know, I feel like sometimes we get trapped in the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have that expansive moment. But even just needs, keeping it at needs in terms of like the basics, because as well as food, shelter, water, whatever, I mean, things like connection, love, those base needs, like even if we just start there, just, you know, it's those kinds of things that I'm like, yeah, we have, at least in my practice, I feel like we have hardened. So on one, to some extent, we've become like super women in that we are ever giving, ever nurturing, ever loving. But the modern woman has kind of had to, she can't be a delicate flower anymore. She's not, you know, waiting at the door for hubby to come home. She's like done everything and is probably wants a hug, but is probably not going to ask for it because, you know, vulnerability doesn't feel that safe. I know that's a bit of a leap, but genuinely I feel like, yeah, the modern woman is less vulnerable, and that kind of robs her of that connection, because I feel like the two things come hand in hand, vulnerability and
connection,
relationships. Yeah, connection.
Yeah, definitely, and that that boundaries as well also really play into connection, because when we have our boundaries, we can really show up as ourselves in relationships, right, rather than pushing that resentment down or presenting in a particular way that doesn't feel true to us, which means we're often disconnected or resentful from people. So I think, yeah, kind of that, having that vulnerability but also having those boundaries allow connection to really happen.
I love what you're saying there about presenting, because I feel like that's again something that happens unconsciously, and we've just become so proficient at it, like especially in our lineup, in my practice, like to get to the point where we're still not in this mode of, oh, but it's actually really good and this is really nice and da 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 da. It's like we are conditioned to, because we're aware of how we're making other people feel. And I feel like men don't have the same filter. I feel like men can walk into a room and just exist, like their consciousness is looking through their eyes and they're in their bodies. Whereas the women that I'm working with are in the minds of other people and looking back at themselves.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I feel like, yeah, in terms of needs and presenting, because they're looking back at themselves, they're presenting. I just like that, the way that you phrased it, because it's such a, you know, you had to create a really safe space to have that mess. And I feel like some people aren't conscious. The presenting has become the self.
Yeah.
You know, because they do it so often, they genuinely believe they're masked. They just know something isn't quite sitting right, and they get that hollow feeling. But this is who they are. They're just a really kind, nice, smoky person.
Yeah. It's interesting though, isn't it, about the difference that you kind of notice there between men and women. And I also wonder about, you know, almost like the thing that came to mind, and this might sound really random, when you said that, was about sending Christmas cards, right? So something that women might feel, I think less so now, but might feel obliged to do, is send Christmas cards, because if they don't get a Christmas card from someone, they might think, well, that's not very nice of them, right? So make a judgment on the person that doesn't. So there's this thing, so that's the internalization, right, of this message, that we should be kind of doing this caring and emotional labor of always thinking about how other people are going to feel if they don't get a Christmas card from us. And I remember, you know, a moment in my probably early 20s where I was like, men don't even care whether they send each other a birthday card. They're just going to go for a pint together or whatever, right? They're not engaging on both sides of that, in this narrative that we have to do something, or that we should do something, otherwise someone will be upset with us, or you know, we will judge someone if they, because we would judge someone if they didn't do it for us. That, you know, that complexity of that, just that energy drain, right? Even talking about it, I'm like, oh, that just feels so tiring way to be in the world. So just noticing that difference, I think, between men and women, where it's almost kind of like there can be this simple, like it just feels simpler.
Oh my God. Imagine just leaving the house and just let that be in your life. You can just leave the house. I'm just like, wow, you haven't thought about how your son's getting picked up. You haven't thought about what you're going to wear. You didn't do any makeup. You haven't thought about what you're eating for dinner. You haven't thought about what needs to be bought from the shop so that the dinner can exist. You've just left the house and seen what's going to happen. I'm just like, wow,
Yeah,
isn't that cool?
there's a great book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky about this sort of everything that it takes to run a household. And again, you know, this kind of also does come back to, so it comes back to how we've been socialized, what we've seen modeled growing up, and you know, how we've then chosen, you know, a partner based upon what our expectations are of these roles as well. But also comes back to what we, you know, almost like the control we can maintain over situations.
Yes.
So yeah, and having to let go of that can feel really difficult.
Yes, I love that. Actually, one of the exercises I do with my clients is to really think about how are you complicit in this, because there is a certain level of I'm getting something back from this, and although we whinge about it and complain about it, there's some sort of power that we can exert in the situation. So I think if we're able to claim that or if we're able to be honest about that level of control, and then think about is that the best way to go about having that control, but that's definitely true.
Yeah, and that's not about shaming or blaming yourself, right, or thinking this is all my fault. It's always it's within a dynamic, so there's two people, you know. And I think that I'm not a couples therapist, but when I hear couples therapists speak, one thing that really comes across is thinking about the dynamic. There's not one person at fault within a relationship. There's always two people that are in the relationship and that contribute to that dynamic. And that's, if we can come to that understanding without shaming or blaming ourselves or our partner, that can feel really helpful realization to move forward. Yeah,
absolutely. So my next question is about what we stand to risk by taking the easy road, because I think it is easier to not have need. Well, on a conscious level, you might think it's easier to not have needs, because then you're agreeable, you're not non-confrontational, you're exhibiting you're not being difficult. Whereas needs can kind of be a bit inconvenient sometimes. So I really want to get into what's the big deal? What are the risks involved in not having needs?
Yeah. So a couple of things come to mind. I guess so the things that we do, like ignoring our needs, people pleasing, putting the needs of others before our own, we can think about them as ways of coping with a society that expects us to do those things, right? So if we step outside of that expectation, then we might be shamed, blamed, stigmatized. We might face violence and abuse, right, in extreme cases. So it's really important to acknowledge that is why doing something different, you know, actually stating our needs can feel so difficult, because we are, in a way, we're rewarded with staying within the confines of these patriarchal narratives by safety, by not being stigmatized, by not facing a backlash from people. So that's why, kind of, as you say, like almost it can feel easier to just think like, well, I'll just not have any needs then. And of course that is one possibility, but what often then arises is that women feel resentful, or they don't feel fulfilled in what they're doing, and these kind of, or they might, you know, be experiencing feeling stuck or feeling angry, resentful, maybe not quite being able to put their finger on what it is that they feel, that they have these difficult feelings, maybe anxiety, maybe low mood, you know, why they have those feelings. So the kind of not having needs is a coping mechanism, and in the short term it makes us feel safe, it makes us feel good, because we're being good mothers, good girls, right, staying within this narrative. So and the alternative is kind of to do the things that we're told not to do, to rock the boat, to say the thing, to be confrontational, to be perceived as not nice, to be perceived as, you know, a bit of a bitch or whatever. So it's really understandable why that feels so tricky. So what we have to kind of do is start weighing up, because there is nothing that you have to do. It's all about, for you, what is going to feel most helpful in your life. So we have to weigh up basically it's a short-term reward when we do the thing, when we don't have the confrontation, when we don't state the need, we immediately feel safe, and that relief of not, you know, perhaps not setting that boundary, we sort of, our nervous system, if you like, gets brought back down. So we feel really relieved at that, and that feels good. Then what might happen is later down the line, we actually feel resentful that we've said yes to that thing, or we didn't state what our need was, and there's been a consequence to that that's later. So we often have short-term consequence of not stating our needs, which is basically about relief. I'm feeling, you know, good, and feeling like we are upholding the narratives of womanhood, which do feel good because we're told they're good, right? So, but then there's these long-term consequences, and as human beings, we often choose the short-term gratification, the short-term relief, over the going through the confrontation, stating the need, for the long-term benefit of no longer feeling resentful. So that's why it's really tricky, and it's also why it's really helpful to learn practices that calm our nervous system, our emotions, basically emotional regulation techniques, so that we can set, in order to even set our boundaries, right, because that can set off our threat system. So learning those techniques then help us to set those boundaries, say the thing we want to say, meet the need that we need meeting, and then we benefit from the long-term consequences. But of course, that just is a longer process, and that's often why we maybe choose that short term, especially if we're in a really stressful situation as well, where we revert to those coping mechanisms of people pleasing, or whatever that is about rejecting our needs. So yeah, it's not easy stuff to kind of overcome, I guess.
No, because it's brilliant what you're saying, and it's really clear the steps. It's just, it becomes on autopilot, like that decision to go for relief happens in a split second, and it's done. So it's just about building the muscle for catching yourself in that moment, and how to break it down to, you know, small steps, like solo missions of, what do I actually want to eat right now? Am I just eating the same, you know, salmon and whatever sandwich that I have every day? What do I need? What does my body need? Right, just having those conversations with self, so starting small and really building up that trust, and then taking it out to the world, you know, because these muscles are strong. This autopilot, this coping mechanism, literally, it's kept you alive up until this point. So then to ask someone to deconstruct that, it's like, you telling me to jump off a cliff right now?
Yeah, Yeah, that's really what it can feel like. And I like this. I like what you say about yeah, you're basically learning to use another muscle and having to strengthen that. I always talk to clients about, like, it's like you've played the guitar all your life and now I'm asking you to play the piano, and you're like, what? And it's so much easier for you to play the guitar because that's what you've been doing throughout your entire life, right? Lots of women that I work with are in their 30s, in their 40s, 30, 40 years, this is what you've been taught to do. And we all know, like, if we try to start playing the piano now, that that's hard. It's almost harder to learn these things now than if they're just modeled to us. And when we're little, then that becomes a more, that it becomes easier to access these ways of coping. So really holding yourself in compassion whilst you do this, as you said before, with yourself first, like, what do I need to eat? Do I need to go for a wee? That one, like, women often they've not even recognized they need to wee, right? Until the last minute, and you're like, oh, I've been holding that in, just getting all the stuff done for everyone else.
Literally, so true. Okay, I've got a final couple of questions for you. What's on offer to women when they're ready to come into alignment with what they want and what they need? What's on the other side of doing all the work?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I'm not sure we ever fully get to the other side, per se. I feel like the work probably just becomes easier. And I guess it will depend on where you are now and where you want to be. But, and so speaking kind of personally, I guess for me, there's a big sense of freedom of being able to decide. So I feel like often the conversation about needs is just, it's about just the unconscious way that we're operating in the world. And so we might feel stuck, we might feel completely like we're not even in control of what we are doing. So I think that on the other side of it, for me, and this might feel different for different people, is kind of that freedom to make choices even if they feel harder, and that is just a very freeing experience, and it allows you, I guess, to meet the goals that you actually want to meet.
It's that fundamental, absolutely, freedom, isn't it? Being in your body, having a full remit of emotions that you're welcoming into your experience without shutting them down before you can process them. This is becoming more human, more of yourself.
I love that. Just understanding yourself, right? Like, and allowing those emotions, compassion and humanness, but allowing ourselves to be human beings.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, last question is, where can people find you?
So I'm on here mainly. On Instagram. So you can follow me on Instagram, and then I have a website, feministtherapycentre.co.uk, where you can see, so I offer one-to-one therapy, and I'm just about to launch a course actually, which is it's called Becoming Conscious, Finding Freedom from Patriarchal Conditioning, and it's really about lots of the things that we've talked about tonight. So that'll be launching tomorrow. But then I'm also very pregnant, so that will be the last kind of offering that I have for a little while.
That's amazing.
So then I'll be around until kind of November, December time, and then back sometime in the spring. But I mean, I really love this platform, and kind of like we met on here, and it's just a really lovely place to meet people, and especially like-minded people, and so I'm always up for a DM conversation.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it's been really amazing. I feel like it's made the world a lot more accessible, especially for mums, you know.
Yeah,
Like the
totally.
Zoom has made things that I wouldn't be able to go to because of, you know, bedtime
Yeah.
accessible to me. So yeah, very, very up for DM convos. You reach out to Bekah. If you're watching this on Rebecca's profile, then I'm Cheryl, May and John. You can follow me. It's been such a beautiful
It
conversation.
has, thank you. It's taken us a while to get here, hasn't it? But I'm
Yeah,
so glad we did, and it's been really
yeah,
lovely to chat to you. And let's
yeah,
defo do it again
for
when I'm back.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure, some absolute gems you were dropping there. So thank you so much for
No,
your
thank
time and
you.
expertise.
Thank you. You too. You too, Cheryl. Like, it's amazing work you're doing, and it's been a real honour to speak to you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Take care. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you. It's been lovely. See you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.